We are live. You're watching the Merged Marketing Podcast. You are listening to the Merged Marketing Podcast. This is episode 197. And in this episode, we're going to go into the Post-iOS 14 Playbook, driving explosive growth in today's digital world. And right there with me today is Kyle Hoffman. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jay. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm super psyched to talk about this post-iOS 14 playbook.
Yeah, it's a question that comes up all of the time from D2C brands. It's like, how do I navigate this post iOS 14 world? Hopefully, we're going to be able to dissect that for you today. But before we get into that, Kyle, maybe give our audience a bit of a background into your journey in the marketing.
Yeah, I've been kind of all over the spectrum. I started off my career in marketing at an agency in the heyday of performance media agencies at Hawk Media. Was a part of some pretty explosive growth there, and that's kind of where I learned to do all the marketing that I know. I worked in paid media and then strategy and kind of across different departments, but got the pleasure of working with tons and tons of different brands there. And then I've also transitioned and worked brand side for a company called Glass, and then fractionally as marketing and e-commerce leadership for a few different companies. And then in 2021, I shifted over to where I am now, which is working for Xenosci Ventures, which is, we'll get into this, I'm sure, but we have a pretty interesting model of shared services. And so I work for one of our portfolio companies called Function Growth as the head of strategy. And through Function Growth, also at our owned and operated brand Wella, which sells compression socks, as basically the fractional CMO. So
very cool. What is that? What is a fraction? What does that entail? A fractional CMO? What are some of the services or items that would fall under a fractional CMO's resume?
Yeah, it's basically all the same things that you do as a CMO, except you get to do it for a bunch of different companies at once. So it gets a little bit busy, but no, I'm in charge of basically making sure that that our strategy lines up with the vision that we have for the company. I'm working cross departmentally all the time, so everything that we're doing on the tech side, everything we're doing on the creative side, everything we're doing on the marketing, all the different marketing channels, whether it's paid media or email. I'm basically kind of facilitating and helping people make decisions and guiding strategy, basically keeping the ship sailing in the right direction.
Very cool.
I would say I'm kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to comes to what a fractional CMO does.
Very cool. So let's dive into specifically what you've done with a company called Wello, a sock brand, and you turned it into one of the fastest growing sock brands in the US in 2 years. Tell us about a bit about that journey and what guided that journey to the end result.
Yeah, it's I think it all kind of, I'll take a step backwards because it all starts with the conception of our company, Xenosci Ventures. Xenosci was started about 25 years ago by our president, Michael Aaron Flicker. We had humble beginnings. It started in his grandmother's basement, and he was in high school, and it was sort of leaning more towards like a web technology and development company. They started to build websites for some pretty high profile brands, and a lot of these brands were asking Michael Aaron, well, what do we put on our website? And he's like, well, that's a strategy question, but I'd be happy to help. And sort of the company evolved into more of a business consulting, and then marketing, and then in turn sort of evolved into a marketing agency. And of course, we do all this business consulting too, and we're big on partnership and all these things. But anyway, about 5 years ago, there's sort of the company sort of started to have these very um, distinct categories of services, if you will. But one part of the company was very good at working with bigger companies, doing more kind of traditional creative agency work, long-term campaigns and big campaigns with big budgets. And then another section of the company was really good at growing D2C brands and doing a lot more of the performance marketing. and so we kind of naturally, those companies sort of naturally split, but we made it official last year and created all of our own companies. So we have Function Growth, which is that D2C focused business, and then Method One, which is sort of the more traditional ad agency. At Function Growth, for the past 5 years, we've been working with a handful of other clients. We have a shared risk, shared reward model. So a lot of times in the past, we've done even equity deals or revenue share deals with our partners, but we were having all the success growing brands, and we thought, why don't we get on the phone? So why don't we launch our own product based brand? And around the same time, Michael Aaron had been traveling across the country almost every weekend for a long distance relationship, his now wife. But he came across compression socks, and then it was kind of one of those things where it was immediately clear that no compression socks that existed were really scratching the itch at all. They were kind of uncomfortable, they weren't colorful, they weren't fun to wear. But for a lot of people, they're necessary pieces of clothing that people need to wear. They get medically prescribed to wear compression socks if they have circulation issues or some other issues. And so, anyway, it was really clear that there was an opportunity in the market, and so Michael Aaron recruited me to help sort of build this brand and get it off the ground and launch it and bring it into the world. And then at the same time, sort of work with Function Growth. But yeah, so in 2021, in October, we launched Wello officially, and it's taken off like wildfire, and we now have over 100,000 customers. I think we're going to sell probably our millionth pair of socks this year, which is it's all very, very exciting.
That is cool. That is super cool. It's also cool to have equity in the clients that you work with or with the clients. So it's more of a partnership. We've started to adopt those relationships more now than ever, where it's like, we are our own client essentially when you become that equity partner, which is awesome to see, and you become more invested and more passionate about what you're doing there as well, right? So,
Absolutely.
so okay, let's talk about or dive into today's topic, which is really dissecting the post iOS 14 playbook, right? And firstly, maybe you can give our audience explain what some of those major changes that iOS 14 brought to the digital advertising landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched, well, like I mentioned, at the end of 2021, which was a debatably a terrible or great time to launch a brand because iOS 14 had just happened, and we made the decision to do almost all of our customer acquisition online and keep it a 100% online D2C business. And it was because we felt confident based on some of the other brands that we were working with that there was still opportunity. I think iOS 14 made it more difficult and changed the game for a lot of people the way that it had been played. We had a lot of the campaigns we were running before, especially on Facebook, and some of the other social platforms were all like hyper targeted, and we were really getting into the audiences that we wanted to target and building campaigns around these audiences. After iOS 14, I think the onus now falls more on the creative. It went from basically a lot of like technical media buying to now becoming very technical creative development, and being super purposeful and iterative with the creative that we're developing. So we have like an entire methodology for testing creative, and this modular approach where we're taking sections of creative and then using them across different assets and then seeing how they perform holistically. But anyway,
Hey,
so
can I
iOS
stop you there,
14,
Kyle? Can I stop you there
yeah,
for a second? I think the method is super relevant and important to this episode. And I know a lot of
yeah.
listeners would be interested in the method, if you can dive into that specifically and what that looks like when you're running testing for a campaign to find which creative element is working best.
Yeah. Yeah, so what we'll basically do is take a piece of creative. So we do a lot of UGC, for example, and a lot of the time we're doing mashups of different pieces of UGC. We're including some product benefit things that we've shot as well. And each of those things will tag with a label. It'll be, intro. It'll be, and maybe there's different kinds of intros we're using. So intro variation one, and then we'll have, UGC that highlights tightness or wellow fit version two. And so basically, we build each asset with this sort of modular framework where we're using all these different assets. Then we go and we build another asset, and we use some of the same assets in the same location. We might move some of them. We use different modular pieces for the content. And then when you put so the key here is it takes a lot of work to be able to do this at scale. And we're launching 20 plus ads a week for a while now, where we have all these different modular assets. At the end of the day, though, you get all of this data, and we can take it back and say, well, this one was working really well, and this one was working really well. Let's back that out into which modular pieces were in those videos, and then lay the data over themselves. And so then we can say, oh, they both had this intro. Well, that's really great. We should continue to use this intro, but let's change out some of these other pieces that were different for each one and see where we can basically end up building this piece of content that it just allows us to continue to optimize it at a more minute detail level than just the ad. Allows you to break down the ad into the components, which is critical.
How long does that process take when you're testing? And are you're continuously testing all the time? Because I mean, obviously you're going to find the winners, the winner copy, winning ad, winner creative, winner, wherever variation of whatever variation you're using for the creative. And once you find that, is there a certain amount of time that typically you'll find that saturates as well?
Yeah. Yeah, we follow I would say we very loosely follow like the 80-20. 80% of what we're doing is iteration, and 20% is brand new concepts, new
Mm.
things.
This is the 20% we're
Um,
talking about here, right?
this is so the iterative part is we find what's working, and we're
Yeah.
iterating on those modular pieces. The
Mm.
new stuff is like, well, let's just try something completely new.
Mm.
And then we might say, well, oh, this new one's working, let's break that down into pieces and create modular out of that. So the modular really is on that 80% iterative. And in terms of timing, it really just depends how much you're spending. We spend pretty sizable amount every month, so we're able to learn pretty quickly. Doesn't take, if we can get, we can probably make a lot of decisions in the course of a week. We'll launch ads one week and then have decisions that we're making the following week. So it really just depends on how much you're spending, though.
Mhm. What percentage of your creative would be user generated content?
That's a good question. Um, Ballpark guess, I would say like 80% probably.
Wow, 80% is UGC.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
interesting.
and
Okay.
it's UGC in the sense of style. It's not necessarily our customers that are creating it.
Yeah.
We have a network of content creators, obviously, and
Mhm.
influencers, and people who are creating the style of UGC videos. But yeah.
So let's talk about how DTC brands can adapt in a post iOS 14 world. Are there some tools that you recommend or innovative approaches that you would suggest that these DTC brands make?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think brands can certainly, like I said, focus on creative. That's huge. The other thing that I talk about a lot is kind of um, subtle innovation. Like we're not creating, super disruptive campaigns, and we're not doing anything that is like crazily obviously innovative when it comes to growing this brand. But there's a ton of stuff that we are putting attention and focus into that sort of is like subtle innovation, which is perfecting the customer journey and the customer experience that people have when they're shopping for our socks. Um, Optimizing our pricing strategy using bundling and our shipping pricing and shipping thresholds and things like that to basically perfectly curate the economic model that we want for the brand. Um, some of these creative things, like I said, taking a modular approach and being very iterative. So there's, um, I think in the post iOS world, it really comes down to customer experience, and so all these little things are basically just fine tuning and making it as ideal for the customer as possible. We just basically we built out the entire CX department internally at Function Growth so that we could offer it for Wello. But giving customers the best experience possible when they're shopping with your brand has really become the focus. So
Is it
um,
there certain ways you're leveraging obviously on platform data such as page engagement, video views, all that type of stuff can still be leveraged in this POIOS 14 world and really leaned into. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. We kind of at the less granular level, and we sort of we look at all the granular data that we have in platforms and we use it to make decisions, but it's not you know the end all be all truth that we're looking at. We when we are looking at the health of the business and trying to project what the next year is going to look like, and we're doing annual planning, we're looking at higher level metrics. What's our blended CAC? What's our ROAS? How much are we spending? Kind of high level metrics. The in-platform data, though, is very helpful for optimizing the campaigns and the creative that we're doing. Things like, clicks, things like click-through rate, clicks, all of the sort of in-platform measurements that are reliable. We're using those to optimize a lot of the campaigns. But
Okay. So with measuring that success, like you said, so my takeaway right there is you've just leaned more into kind of a macro level at analyzing the business as opposed to a micro level as you used to when the data was much more reliable. Are there any of those? Are there any new metrics or KPIs that DTC brands should really start leaning into or mimic what's working for you guys?
yeah, I mean, I think it's different for every business. We're lucky in that we have essentially one product, and we have different customer groups and different audiences, but for the most part, they're pretty easy to parse out and not all that relevant because everyone's using it for the same reason. When you have different products and your products are used for a lot of different things and they fulfill different needs for different people, then data can become a lot more important, I think. Um, but for us, we're looking at it's blended CAC, it's blended ROAS,
Can you define
it's
CAC
revenue and
for
spend.
users?
Yeah, customer acquisition costs.
Yeah.
And so we just take. I mean, we're running quite a few different media channels: Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, CTV, all sorts of Google, all sorts of stuff. And so looking at it holistically is helpful for us. We're going to get to the point where, again, if you have tons of media channels that you're using or less reliable sources of attribution like these ad platforms, then maybe you want some sort of other attribution software. So I think as much data as you can collect, that's great. It's great to look at, but in terms of understanding the health of your business, the easiest things to benchmark against across the industry and to also have the most reliable data are kind of those macro metrics. So
As we approach 2024, how do you see the digital landscape continuing to evolve post iOS 14? Do you see any changes up around the bend, and maybe potentially how are you using AI and how that works into the mix?
yeah, AI is always interesting. Right now, we sort of use AI mostly just as kind of a brainstorming partner, and it sort of just helps us to do some research, and it's sort of like having almost an intern who can get projects started, and then I think that we're just barely scratching the surface with AI. It's become super important, and every single person at the company uses it every single day, and we're still barely scratching the surface. So I think there's a lot of potential, especially with like the things that I was talking about with modular creative optimizations and iterations. I had stuff that in AI can do all day long in its sleep, and and be a lot easier than us pulling together spreadsheets and analyzing data. But yeah, so AI is going to have a massive impact on the industry. I think more immediately in 2024. I mean, I think there will be a lot of marketing AI tools that become accessible for D2C companies in the next year. So we'll see what that brings. But what we've noticed is that some costs on advertising, I think, are starting to go up. So I wouldn't be surprised if advertising again gets more competitive in 2024. I think there was sort of this lag period after iOS 14 where a lot of advertisers weren't quick to adapt to the new way that Facebook works, and obviously creative development is a lot more intensive than just logging into a platform and targeting audiences, and creative development takes time, and it takes attention to get it right. So I think that brands are finally catching on to that, and I think TikTok was a big part of that. It sort of showed people that there's a style of content that works really well with UGC, and it's not super expensive to produce, and everyone should make it, and that's kind of what's working on Facebook. So I think a lot of brands are catching on to that, and that's why some of the advertising costs are going up. But if you can find ways to optimize and iterate on all the things you're doing on when it comes to media, then it's still a great channel. I also think that there's gonna be a lot more people who focus on sort of like word of mouth and just like customer experience. Like I said, creating products and customer experience that makes people want to tell people about it to their friends. I think there's going to be sort of this resurgence of really focusing on what that real experience is with your product and how people are promoting it to their friends. It's sort of, I think performance marketing got away from that, and that was kind of like the traditional way that people tried to grow brands. But performance marketing, with all these tools and data available to us, we got really excited, and it worked for so long. But now I think that brands and companies need to focus a little bit more on that and move it back into their mix.
Definitely. Awesome. Kyle, if our audience has any questions for you, how can they get in touch, and how can they find the brand Wello online?
Yeah, we'll include a link to my LinkedIn, and then if you ever want to reach out to us and get a hold of me via email, or you're interested in working with Function Growth, you can go to functiongrowth.co, and you'll see a place to sign up and put your email in, and we'll get in touch with you through there. You can also feel free to email me. My email is khoffman@functiongrowth.co. And yeah, we're open to talking to brands. We like to build our network and chat about some of the things that we're seeing in the industry, and share knowledge. And yeah, we'd love to get in touch with people.
Cool. What's the website for Wello?
The website for Wello is wherewello.com.
There you go. There you go. Awesome. We had a question in the comments there for the sock company. So somebody might go and check that out for sure. Awesome. Well, Kyle, we end every episode with the same question. That question is this: if you can choose one person, dead or alive, to represent your brand, who would it be and why?
Oh man, that is a good question. I think for Where Wello, it would have to be someone who's big in the health and wellness space.
Andrew
I think
Tate.
Oprah.
You're the other way with that.
I think Oprah would be perfect for our Wello compression socks.
Nice. Definitely a great brand ambassador, and Oprah has been mentioned a few times on this question on this podcast. So there you go. Awesome. Kyle, thanks for your time.
Yeah. Thank you, Jay.